The Olive Tree Initiative just started with a bunch of students on campus from various different religions, cultures, political views, backgrounds, came together and they wanted to go and actually learn firsthand about the conflict that was going on in Israel and Palestine.
So students who are Muslim, Jewish, Druze, Christians, and other religions and backgrounds came together and came up with this idea that we were going to travel there as a group and see what's going on in the region from our own perspectives rather than what we hear from other people or the media.
Something people ask me a lot of the time is, oh, so you got to go on this trip for free? And my response is, nothing is for free.
I think there were times nobody wanted to say we thought it wouldn't happen, but they kept coming back to the table because they believed in it, and that's why it happened.
We exceeded my expectations entirely by raising the $60,000 to go on our trip. And it was a real hurdle to convince other people that it was something that could happen and should happen.
We introduced ourselves as students from UCI going on a trip independent of any organization. And that's how we made it happen.
Our main goal was to spend equal times in Israeli territory and Palestinian territory, so we really split up our days.
We went to Israel and we also went to Palestine in the West Bank, the cities there. We went to Ramallah, we went to Bethlehem, we went to Hebron. We actually stayed in Jerusalem, the old city, and we went to Haifa and Nazareth and Tel Aviv, which are all Israeli cities.
At all these places, we got to speak to different people, politicians, government officials, civilians, just everyday people who have to live this conflict.
The students made a request that they get to ask all the questions in the meetings. That was one thrilling moment, to know that the students were desperate to be able to ask questions, had that level of inquisitiveness.
It's very tragic that such a beautiful place could have so much conflict.
Most of the people, the majority of the people that we spoke to, do want peace and are living with each other and are neighbors door to one another.
Everyone feels connected to this place. Well, being there, I felt like it was my home, you know? It's easy to feel connected to it.
And I think that particularly what we learned coming back from this trip is that there isn't two sides of the conflict in order for you to be able to say that I'm pro one and not the other. We just saw that there was such a variety of opinions.
There's a lot of different viewpoints over there, a lot of different perspectives. The settler in Ariel has a different perspective than the settler in Gush Etzion, you know. There's people in Bethlehem have different perspectives than the people in Ramallah. So it's really complex, it's really difficult to understand.
For me personally, my high point during this trip was every morning I would walk down, when we were in Jerusalem, I would walk down to Al-Aqsa, the Dome of the Rock, for prayer. And as I was walking down, I saw Christians going to church, and I saw Jews going to the wall. And I realized that we're all going for the same purpose, to worship and please our Lord. And that to me, in one city, and in a peaceful environment, for me, that was most pleasing, I think. It was awesome.
differing viewpoints actually teach you a lot about your own viewpoint. And having these different perspectives in the group opened my eyes to that, and it taught me a lot about the other side and this perspective that I had in the beginning.
I learned that it was okay to disagree, and it was okay to not have the same viewpoint as everyone else, and you can still have a discussion and not hate each other or be discivil to each other.
I really loved how everyone in the group felt comfortable to hold their positions and express those positions, and they were absolutely different among our group. There were varying positions, almost as varying as they are in the region.
At the beginning, one of the hurdles of the trip was that people believed this is a kind of a peace-building trip, where even the students came in and make clear, and I loved it from the beginning, we're not here to change our opinion. And I confirm that and say, no, I don't want you to change your opinion. That's not why you're going on the trip. Peace-building doesn't mean you go and afterwards you're all best friends and big buddies, and you all love and kiss each other. It's about how this trip encourages you more learning and knowing about a situation. That encourages the dialogue, and that more dialogue and this more kind of communication then may lead to better understanding and conflict resolution. But this is an optional thing.
Initiatives like the Olive Tree Initiative are helping to bring back new ideas and new dialogue to campus. But I think the vast majority of the campus would fall within what we would call moderate. And unfortunately, like the media outside, they like to focus on the extreme viewpoints because that's what sells. No one wants to hear about students on campus making peace. They want to hear about students fighting and students disagreeing with each other.
Again, it's like an academic environment. It's for an exchange of ideas between people who have differing opinions. And I think if you can't have these academic discussions, this academic dialogue with differing opinions on this campus at a university, then where are you supposed to have this discussion?
And I think UCI is full of intelligent people, and they're a really progressive campus. And I think we can be known for being a campus that really did something amazing instead of, just another campus that protests about Israel and Palestine.
This trip was truly the epitome of a scholarly adventure, I guess you can say.
It was so profound and so eye-opening, I can't even put it into words.
Just a few days into the trip, I realized how important this is and how much responsibility I should be taking to make sure that we actually take this back to campus and take this back to the people and show them what we've done.
Our main goal is to get other students involved. We don't want to just limit it to just us who went on the trip and got the experience, but we're hoping to have another trip with new students who can go as well, and to also have open dialogue here on campus.
The hardest barriers are out of the way now. We already figured out how to raise money and how to deal with bureaucracy and things like that. And now it's up to the next group of students to take initiative and become the new leaders of the next, OTI Part 2.
It kind of reaffirms the idea that I had that, a group of people can really change the world, or a group of people can really make a difference in this world if they want to.
Every single one of these students is a leader. These are students whose lives and actions from here on out on this campus and beyond are going to make a huge difference everywhere they go and have an effect on the rest of the world.
Every single speaker we heard when we were there, whether it was on the political side or a more personal side, whether they were negotiators or whether they're just civilians, they all seem to want the same thing. And they all seem to advocate understanding. And I think that's very important because when you bring it back to campus, when you bring it back to the United States, that is essential. Without understanding, there is nothing.
As the panelists make their way to the stage, I would like to recognize and welcome some special guests this evening, beginning with Dr. Michael Drake, Chancellor of the University of California at Irvine. On behalf of the students and the participants, I would like to welcome Beth Crom, Mayor of the City of Irvine. We welcome Shalom Elkott, Chief Executive Officer of the Jewish Federation of Orange County. We welcome Issa Edatali, President of the Islamic Center of Irvine. And we welcome members and family of the UCI Foundation Board, namely Mrs. Susan Samueli, Doug Freeman, and Hassam and Salma Chahabi. We also welcome other distinguished visitors and guests, too many to name, and all of you, of course, students, colleagues, friends, and family of UCI. We will now move to the main event. The students and participants in the Olive Tree Initiative wanted to spend an evening sharing some of their experiences and insights from this remarkable voyage of theirs. So we will give them that opportunity. Each will introduce himself or herself briefly and share one memorable experience from their trip to Israel and the Palestinian territories.
My name is Omar Bustami. I'm a senior here at UC Irvine. I study civil engineering. My parents are they're from Arabic descent. My dad is originally from Syria. My mom is originally Lebanese. So as you can imagine, going into this trip, I had a few preconceived notions about how the place was and what I've heard from other people. One of the things that I'd repetitively been told and heard a term, it's politically charged apartheid. And we all hear that term frequently. I think it has a recurring soundbite in the media every once in a while. But what exactly does apartheid mean? And I used to look at people and actually used to tell them that I don't know what you guys are talking about, because apartheid refers to a de facto civil rights situation. Has nothing to do with what's going on in the Middle East. That's a conflict that's going on militarily. So to talk about one of the most meaningful experiences I had, that will tie into that first point. Right when I got to Jerusalem, we were staying in this hostel in the old city, a beautiful hostel, very classic style, and overlooking all the streets of Jerusalem where so many different ethnicities and religions come together. And everyone had been dead exhausted from the 12-hour flight. Got quite a few stories from that flight about how I was bugging people, but we're not going to get into that right now. So coming back from that flight, we're all exhausted. We just want to go straight into the hotel room and go to bed. But I was a little excited to explore, because I have an explorative nature to me. So I start going around on the rooftop. I run to the top and I start going around looking to the left and the right for all these different things. And from that rooftop in Jerusalem, I could see so many different things, so many different domes and crosses, and all. I didn't know any of them were, but as I came to learn later, the first thing that I saw on my left was the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, which is one of the holiest sites in the Christian religion. And then I continued to move forward because I was so excited that I'd seen something that looked that remarkable. I just wanted to find something else. So I went forward a little more, and eventually I came up the steps, and what I found was the Dome of the Rock. And coming upon that was the very first time I'd seen it. It was as if I had found it. And almost, if you read Islamic history, you know that Jerusalem had been conquered many times, and one of the times it was by the Arabs under the Arab Caliph Omar ibn Khattab. So I almost felt like Omar ibn Khattab. I'm like, oh my God, I just conquered Jerusalem. I just found the roof. I just found the Dome of the Rock. It's like mine now. And I felt very liberated. I'm like, this is awesome. So then, I went to bed. I was all excited. And what happened, I woke up the next morning and we start going around and touring all over the place and looking over the hilltops that overlook Bethlehem. And then we came to a very peculiar site. We came to a road. Actually, there were two roads. And one of them was built on the ground. It weaved in and out. It wasn't very, very wide. It wasn't very modern. Didn't look like it. And there was another road. It was elevated that went directly on top of that road. There were two roads built over the exact same geographical GPS position. They went to the same exact point. And what I realized was that these roads were not intended for the same people. And that's when I realized what apartheid meant. I understand that the state of Israel does not have, apartheid within it. It is a democratic state that practices Western ideals. But that's when I understood that in the West Bank, there's two groups of people living side by side with each other. And what that image did is it solidified in my mind that, no, although I felt that I liberated it that morning, it's not okay. The situation's not okay. There's still hostility going on in the region. It clarified some things in my mind. I'd have to say that was the most meaningful, drawn-out story of the event. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. My name is Manuel Gomez. I serve as Vice Chancellor for Student Affairs here at UC Irvine, and I was extremely fortunate in my estimation to have been allowed to go with our students on this extraordinary educational tour. I'm supposed to be very brief on a memory, and there are so many memories I have. I fell in love with the land of Israel, the sweet light of that land. I fell in love with that city of Jerusalem, which is its stones breathe history, its corridors, its buildings. It's just an extraordinary city. About 9 days into the tour, we went far deep into the West Bank, and we visited a settlement called Ariel, one of the oldest ones, established in 1978. And I saw our students all gathering around the table. It was a very nice table with a cup of coffee ready for us. And the mayor, I think his name was Ron Nachman, started speaking to us, but immediately he was looked us over, and he was a very intense individual, a little bit of the Israeli spirit in him, and he had this ability to connect and catch people and talk to them. And he looked us over, and he said, I'm impressed with you guys. And he went, and you could tell that he was telling us something authentic right from his heart. He said, I invited Condoleezza Rice here, and she was afraid to come here. You guys had the courage to come here and look with your own eyes and judge with your own views and come and visit and talk with us. And at that moment, my heart was just thumping with pride for the incredible, impressive nature of our students, their leadership, and how they represented themselves and how they represented UC Irvine. It was one of the many, but this one stood out as a memorable moment for me.
Hello, I'm Tzvi Raviv. I'm a Jewish agency Shaliach in the Hillel Foundation of Orange County. I'm in charge of education about Israel for students in Orange County. My memorable moment was, it's complicated. At the beginning of the year, Ali Malik came to me and told me, I told him that I'm going to Israel, told me when I meet my niece to tell her that Muslim people are cool. So during the trip, one day, my family came to pick me up to go home. It was a free weekend. So Ali asked me if he can come to my place. I said, yeah, why not? If you want to meet my family, you're welcome. So he went to my house in Ashkelon, that's in the southern Israel, and he had the opportunity to play with my niece. She's 1 year old, and tell her that Muslim people are cool. So I hope she'll remember it for the future.
Hi everybody, my name is Samira Ali, and my most memorable moment on the trip was going to Masjid al-Aqsa in the Old City and being able to pray there. I don't even know how to describe in words. It was the most wonderful experience I've ever had. It was definitely life-changing, and it was really spiritual to see that. For those of you guys that don't know, Masjid al-Aqsa is one of the 3 most holiest places in the Islamic faith. So just to be there was I felt very blessed. And then a couple of days later, we went to Bethlehem, which is in the West Bank, and I was talking to the Palestinian families there. And I was talking to this one lady, and I was just telling her about how I went to go pray at Masjid al-Aqsa. And she lives literally 10 minutes away, and she lived there for her entire life. And she was telling me how she dreams of going and praying, to go and pray there, and how she's never been able to. And it was kind of awakening to see that the privilege I was given, other people aren't given the same privilege. And the Old City should be a place where everyone can go worship on their own freely. And that was my most memorable moment by far.
Hi, my name is Yvonne. I study political science, and I'm a part of Model United Nations. There were so many meaningful experiences that it was definitely very difficult to choose, but one that sticks out in my mind was we had Shabbat dinner one Friday on the rooftop in the Old City, and it just really struck me how on a basic level everyone just wants the same thing. Everyone just wants to be able to live their lives peacefully and be able to be with their friends and loved ones. And as we were eating, we were overlooking 4 different quarters. We were overlooking the Christian, Muslim, Jewish, and Armenian quarters, and everyone just coexists peacefully on a day-to-day basis. And that was just a really profound moment for me to just realize how many commonalities and how alike we all are.
My name is Sally, and I'm in the Middle East Studies Student Initiative. One of the moments that I will share is when I, along with Vice Chancellor Gomez and Dr. Garb, went with our guide Guido to we woke up to be at the Church of Holy Sepulchre at 6 a.m. We got to the church, we got to tour it, and it was an amazing tour. And I really wanted to stay to try to see that there's a special place that everyone has, whoever travels there, you just have to go there, or else you're missing the church. And I wanted to wait, and there was a long line, so Guido went to go drop Dr. Gomez and Dr. Garb off, and then he came back to pick me up, and on the way back to our hostel, he showed me a line, or it's an imaginary line, but there's he shared one of the plans of splitting Jerusalem, and this line runs straight through the road where everyone just walks through, and I just couldn't imagine how, if the city would be split according to this plan, how are these people going to react? How, the shopkeepers or the people who just are used to going back and forth, what's going to happen to them? I just couldn't believe it, and hopefully there are other better plans about the city, and I guess that's all for now. Thank you.
Okay, a really memorable moment for me was, we visited a viewpoint where you could see the city called Kikilia, and the city is surrounded completely by a wall, a security wall, and a former IDF, or not former, he was a soldier in the IDF, was explaining to us the situation there. He was one of the soldiers who secured the city, and I found myself really angry hearing how the people there had to live at the expense of what a minority of terrorists, extremists did, and that they're all being punished, being told when they can leave, when they can't. And maybe a couple days later, we met with 2 fathers who had both lost their children in suicide bombings. And that was the moment for me, because I'd spent a lot of time being really, really angry at the way the Palestinians have been treated. And then meeting these fathers and talking to them, and one of the fathers said, I agree that we don't have the right to take away the rights of the Palestinians, but my daughter didn't have a right to have her life taken away. And at that moment, I felt horrible that I had the audacity to assume to know what these people were going through, what it was like for both sides, and to say what they should do to create peace. And I still believe in peace, but I feel like we really need to listen to the people there, because they're the ones living through these things we can't even begin to understand. And that was a very moving moment for me.
Hi, my name is Paul McGuire. I'm an international relations student, and I'm part of the Middle East Studies Student Initiative as well. I think it was our second day, we were in Jerusalem at our Lutheran hostel, and we're sitting in the garden. We had a guest speaker, Yitzhak Frankenthal, who was a prominent Israeli businessman who I think it was 7 years ago, his son, who was serving in the Israeli Defense Forces, was captured and kidnapped, and killed by Hamas. And he decided to start a foundation called the Parents Circle, which is for parents, bereaved parents, both Israeli and Palestinian, to come together and share their loss and what they've learned from the experience. And much later, when we were in Bethlehem, we met Youssef, who was a father of a 17-year-old, and his son was a church deacon, and he was on his way to church and close to entering the church when he was struck by a bullet and by a sniper, and apparently it was an Israeli sniper bullet. And so he as well suffered loss, and including because Israelis were afraid that he might retaliate as many times as it occurs, his permit, job permit was revoked. And it made me realize that these, these are not personal tragedies. These are public tragedies. And only in the American individualistic, privatized sense can these be called personal tragedies. And I think these are symptoms of an established disorder that we saw in that region. And we're working, I think, all to contribute to ending that.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Isaac Yerushalmi, and I'm the president of Anteaters for Israel, as well as a member of Hillel and AEPI. I think one of my most memorable moments on this trip was one day we went to the beach in Tel Aviv, and we met with a couple of students from Tel Aviv University, Israeli students. One of them was actually a soldier who fought in the recent Lebanon war. And he sort of, well, I guess a little info about our group. We have two Lebanese students that were in our group, Amanda and Dana, who's not here with us today. And they were actually in Lebanon during the war. So this soldier came, and he talked about how when he was fighting the war, he was in the hills in Lebanon, and his job was to find where Hezbollah was shooting missiles from, and to report it to the Air Force so they could strike the locations. But he talked about how when he was in Lebanon and in those hills, how he thought it was such a beautiful country, and how he really wished that he was there, not to be fighting this war, but to be, just to see the country and to appreciate it for its beauty. And I saw Dana and Amanda sitting there talking to a soldier who, just 2 years ago, was fighting and in their country, and I just thought it was really beautiful. A few days later, I was talking to Dana about the whole thing with Hezbollah in Lebanon, and she was telling me about how the youth in Lebanon aren't very fond of Hezbollah. They don't really like them. But during the war 2 years ago, when Israel attacked Lebanon, of course there was collateral damage, and that sort of made the youth support Hezbollah maybe just a little bit. And it made me realize that really the true enemy of everyone is extremism, and the extremism is what's really creating conflict between people who are ready to sit down next to each other and talk.
Hello, everyone. My name is Amanda Naufal, and I served as president for Society of Arab Students last year. I was born here in California, but I lived in Lebanon for 4 years. For me, the most meaningful moment was, aside from all the amazing speakers we got to meet with, we also had a chance to speak with locals. And one of the stories that has stuck with me is a conversation I had with our bus driver, who after a couple days of traveling with us, we had just gotten done with our tour in Bethlehem, and we were getting on the bus. And I'm walking up into the bus to go back to the hostel, and he tells me in Arabic, you know that you guys are just wasting your time. And so I look at him and I said, why? He said, I've been doing this for 15 years. And for 15 years, I've brought people from the States, and I've taken them all over Israel. I've taken them all over Palestine. They've cried for Israeli children. They've cried for Palestinian children. And they say the situation is horrible, things need to change, but then they go back home, they live their lives, and they forget. So 15 years, and I haven't seen any change. Why are you guys any different? And I was caught off guard. I kind of didn't really know what to tell him. I mean, all I could really say was, no, we're different, but how cliche does that sound? I mean, I'm sure every group had told him, we're different. So for me, I knew it couldn't just be that. We couldn't just have gone, listened to these people, seen their struggle, and come back and leave it at that. There has to be more, and the least I could do is bring back those stories. And I think all of us here feel that same way, where that's the least we can do, is show people here that there's a whole nother world, very, very different than our own, with a whole people that we could never really understand what they're going through, and the least we could do is really just bring back their stories. So that was my most meaningful moment.
Hello, everybody. I'm Maran Cohen, and I'm a career member of Anteaters for Israel and Hillel Jewish Student Union. My most memorable moment was the day we visited Hebron. And I was born in Israel. I grew up there, and I moved to the United States about 7 years ago. And I mean, a lot of the cities, the main cities in Israel that we visited, like Jerusalem and Haifa and Tel Aviv, were cities that I've visited before, but as a family vacation or to see relatives or whatnot. But going to Hebron was my first time ever, and it was just something that shocked me, and I've never seen anything like that, and it was just something that I couldn't have gone otherwise without the group. But the thing that was so tremendous about it was that we started walking through the Muslim quarter at first, and it was just a normal city. I mean, there was people all over the place, there were cars, shops, we kept getting honked at to move off the street while we were walking. I mean, it was just very lively. And as we're touring the city, we crossed over to the Jewish quarter, and it was just a ghost town. I mean, I think we all pretty much saw the differences, and it was just so shocking to me to see these two differences. And I mean, through the streets of the Jewish quarter, there were just soldiers, us, and a few people that walked by and stared at us as if, what are you guys doing here? And it was just so weird for me to see that, because I wasn't used to seeing anything like this. And I think just hearing the speakers there, we had two tour guides leading us through both quarters, and they just explained, both of them agreed, that the reason it's such a disputed city is because there's so much religious background in that city. And I mean, both religions, Islam and Judaism, share so many values that I think that adds to the tension between them and to the tense atmosphere that was felt through the city. And another thing about Hebron was that we went to see Abraham's tomb, and it has two sides. There's the mosque and there's the Jewish side. And we went in through the mosque and we saw the tombs, and you know, and Ali and the Muslim students, they all prayed in there, and it was great. And then a few of us got a chance to go into the Jewish side and see the same thing. And I think what was incredible about this was that there is just a bar window separating the tomb and the mosque and the synagogue. And it's just, the people are praying there every single day. I mean, hundreds of citizens and tourists and whatnot go in there every single day, and they pray, see each other through those windows, but they don't talk. I mean, they're just, every single day, they see each other, they stare each other in the eyes, but they don't talk to each other, they don't communicate, and yet it is such a disputed city that some people even still consider a settlement. So I thought that was really like incredible, and it emphasized how important it is to see both sides, how we were able to do, and to understand what each is going through. And that was really important for me. So.
Hello, everyone. My name is Sharush Shahande. I'm a political scientist, I guess you can say. I also double majored in international studies with a emphasis in the Middle East. I'm Iranian by background, but I went as unaffiliated on this trip, as in I didn't really have a student organization that I was directly affiliated with. My most memorable moment, I had great conversations, great memories, but this one really kind of stands out when I look at my whole trip to Israel and Palestine. And that was Shabbat dinner. And we celebrated Shabbat on Friday, as it always is. It was my first Shabbat dinner. And we were in the old city. And we were in between the Christian, the Armenian, the Muslim, and the Jewish quarter on a rooftop. We were in the Orthodox part of this quarter. And from the rooftop, you can see the whole entire city beneath your feet. Up on this rooftop, you had Muslims, Jews, Druze, Christians, people from unaffiliated backgrounds, just such a mixed group of people, 20-plus people sitting there, breaking bread, drinking together, laughing, singing. And it really kind of struck me, and it was incredible. It was, if I would have ever thought this would have been possible in such a city that's had a history of turmoil and history of conflict, that it was just so moving and powerful to me that this is what it could be like. This is what it really could be like when we sit down and talk to each other, when we sit down and have some sort of dialogue, and we focus on what brings us closer together than what divides us and what makes us different from each other. And that really stuck with me, and it really made me kind of understand that this is not necessarily a religious conflict. This is a political conflict, that political conflicts can be solved. We have more in common than we do different, and that's what I really realized on that rooftop, and it was really empowering that such a group can come together and put aside their differences and have real dialogue and real conversation. And if we can do this in our community, I'm 100% positive we can make this change in other communities. And starting one community to another community to another community and working from the bottom up. And I had this realization on Shabbat dinner. And Shabbat Shalom, I mean, you stop everything, you kind of think in the now, in that moment. And that was the first time I kind of, realized that. And at that moment, that's what I thought. At that moment, that was very real to me. And I really believe in that. I wholeheartedly believe in this grassroots movement that comes along through dialogue and through understanding and through focusing on what brings us together than what divides us. So that was really one of the most moving and memorable moments of my trip.
Really great to see you all here. I'm Paula Garb, and I teach anthropology and conflict resolution, and I work with another group in the Caucasus facilitating dialogue across a bloody divide. I'd never been to Israel, and my background is that my father, born Jewish in the Russian Empire during the Civil War, when the two sides were fighting over who would control the territory. My father's family was tortured and killed in front of him, and he became a war refugee, came to the United States at the age of 12. And my mother, when my father married my mother, she was Lutheran and German, we lost both extended families. So I grew up in a family without family because they could not cross those divides. So I did not expect on this trip for my Jewish roots. I just wasn't thinking of it. But at the Shabbat dinner, which was hosted by a Canadian young man and woman, they had come from a campus in Canada where they had similar dynamics as the UCI campus, so they were speaking American to us or to me. There was a lot of commonality, and at some point, after the singing and the dinner and all of us together, I thought, oh, I'm at home now. This is my father's land. And then I had to realize, no, my father never was here. And I wasn't born here, but a connectedness to Israel And from then on, I really opened up in a way that I had not been able before emotionally. Intellectually, I'd always understood the need for a Jewish state. But from that moment on, for the rest of the trip, it triggered in me a real deep understanding of what it means to have a Jewish state. And for me, then, the conflict became all the more complicated and confusing.
I'm Daniel Varenfenig. I'm a graduate student in political science, and was honored to be on this trip and help to organize and be there. As a graduate student, I will share, with so fantastic emotional points, I will share a little more intellectual point. Not that it's not important to be emotional. For me, this region is part of my thesis work. So I've been traveled there a lot, interviewed a lot of people, been in many cities. But one thing, and I work on the issue of communication, why communication is important. And however, we met with a person called Harry Hurwitz. Unfortunately, he died about a week and a half ago. So probably we were the last group he talked to. Amazing person. He's the founder of the Begin Center in Jerusalem. He was a close aide to Menachem Begin, the former Israeli prime minister. And he shared with us why he believes that there's only one real peace treaty in the Middle East between Egypt and Israel. And he shared with us why he believes, what's missing. And for me, that was interesting, kind of intellectual to hear that. And he said, what Begin and Sadat did to get this deal, signed or get to this deal, was that they did not do the back channel, that they don't do the today's kind of behind the door negotiations, but that they were able and brave enough to stand up, step up, and did a public, open peace deal and visited each other and were able to speak things out and did not try the modern-day politics of behind the doors, back-channel talks and all of that. And for me, somebody who really believes in dialogue and back-channel talks, that was a challenge. But I think there's a lot to that. And I think there's a lot to that besides talking and besides being smart and working out points, you have really be brave enough to step up and, as leaders, but also as student leaders, and that's the same for the Middle East as it is for the campus. And I think, they were not close best friends. They had their differences, but they stepped up, and that really brought the only peace agreement in the region, really. I mean, there were, a couple ones afterwards, but they're really the one that is so challenging and different, and I think it was amazing to hear that. And sorry that Terry will not be able to share that story to others, but we will keep on telling his story from now onwards. Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Seppi Termechi. I am part of Hillel Jewish Student Union as well as Ain't Eaters for Israel. And one of the most memorable experiences for me, I guess, was when we were in Haifa. And Haifa, as many of you may know, is the center for coexistence. It's very well known to have a place where people of many different religions live side by side. And for me, it was the epitome of what I wanted to learn about. And going to Maxim, which is a restaurant that has been rebuilt after being bombed in the past, and listening to one of the owners who was Arab. Actually, Maxim is owned by an Arab family and a Jewish family, and listening to him talk about what happened and how they rebuilt the restaurant and how it's been such a success and how it's brought so many people together was really awe-inspiring and just hit the point home. Like, it just really resonated with me, and it made me think that if this city, this restaurant even, can rebuild itself and work towards peace and work towards a place where you can coexist, then there's hope for the rest of Israel, there's hope for these people, and it's achievable. And it just kind of helped me fill in some of the gray areas that I was thinking about.
Assalamu alaikum and shalom to all you. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Definitely the most memorable moment for me, or moments I could say, were the mornings we would walk down to Al-Aqsa for prayer. And the fact that, I know the video kind of semi-killed what I was about to say, but the fact that when you walk down the corridors of Jerusalem, the city of peace, so many people talk about how the issue, the conflict is about religion. And the fact that Jews and Muslims were walking down, focused on one thing and one thing only, was to worship their Lord in complete sincerity. That, to me, was a manifestation of religion being and prayer being a means of peace for the situation. And it has nothing, absolutely nothing to do with politics. And the occupation has everything to do with the conflict. It's not religion. It's something political, and it's sociological. And being there brought that forth. It brought that to light. The fact that religion has nothing to do with it. The most religious people I met were the people pushing for peace, the people who were praying for peace, and those who were divorced of religion were just confused and conflated with politics. And that has everything to do with the situation. And I think if we look deeper into ourselves and we ask, being there made me realize that you have to ask God to bring solutions to the situation. And that if you put it in our hands, we're by default susceptible to mistakes. And if it's up to us, we're going to fail. But being there made me realize in the city of peace, the third most holy place in Islam, and the holiest place, I'm assuming, for Jews, that prayer and asking God for assistance in this matter is the only way to bring about peace in the conflict.
Well, I definitely couldn't have learned what it's like to party it up in a Tel Aviv discotheque. But no, come on, guys, really, that's not all we did. All right. No, but on a serious note, you land in the airport and you're scrutinized to checks. Not all of us. You pass through so many checkpoints, and you figure out that this process is so incredibly difficult. And just, a couple of weeks before the trip, I was talking to a cousin of mine who'd recently visited, and he told me that he spent 3 hours in, a crossing station between Jordan and Palestine, and I was like, wow, that must be horrible. And he said, you don't understand. Once you get to the other side, it's totally worth it. And what I understood from that I couldn't have understood, from not going, is that if it's worth it, for me to do that one time, what does it mean to the Palestinian people to cross those checkpoints every day of their life? And you continuously see them enduring that. And then if you realize that they've been enduring this long, you know for a fact that they're going to continue to endure. So many things that are not even easy to express over here. The infusion of culture is remarkable. No one explained that to me. When I was in a taxi cab in Tel Aviv and I'm overhearing the cab driver talking in what I call era Hebrew, I don't know what it was. It was like I half understood it, half was confused, and then realized that this guy is literally speaking similarly to what we refer over here as Spanglish. It was just like that kind of infusion of culture. You don't understand that this conflict has been occurring for 50, 60 years, And there is an entire class of people that has been, entire generation that has brewed up since then. And when you're taught about the conflict from so many miles away, I often describe it as a puzzle. There's so many pieces in a puzzle, 1,000 pieces. You can be given these facts bit by bit, but you're never really going to understand how that puzzle looks until you see it all put together. And I would have never known about, the most beautiful non-holy site mosque that I ever prayed in, which was, in Tel Aviv, it overlooked the ocean. I'd have never known about that. And this all, it enables the possibility in one's mind to understand that we're really becoming a globalized world. Tel Aviv is no different from Beirut, is no different than Paris. I saw every single color in Tel Aviv. No one described that to me. I think that's all I have to say.
Muy bueno, mi good amigo. That's a little Spanglish for you. The question is, what did we learn that we never would have learned were we not there? And that's a very difficult question, and it's difficult for me to express exactly what I want to express. It goes something like this, if I can try, though. I never would have realized in any way, all the readings I've done, and I thought I was pretty well read, about the intimacy of the spatial relations, the cultural relations, the physical relations, the religious relations, on top of each other, the intimacy of the space between Jerusalem and Bethlehem, Ramallah and Nazareth, and Jericho, and the Dead Sea. It's almost like as if, well, it is, in fact, was like one day's travel. And in cars, we get there in 20 minutes, 40 minutes, depending on the traffic. And it was so stunning to see the intimacy of this land, and the conflicts and the contradictions and the memories all clashing, and also all congruent and cooperating. And lastly, compassion. Compassion coming from the most unexpected directions, and the multiplicity of opinions and views, all simultaneously in this intimate space. I never would have realized that or learned that where I did not have had the opportunity to be there in that space.
My story is a little bit different. I'm Israeli, so I know the area pretty good. But last May, there was a week dedicated to the hatred of Israel, I'll call it, and there was a photo exhibition about what's going on in the Palestinian territories. And Dana Balud, she's not here, went to this exhibition, and after watching it, came with tears in her eyes to me and said, "What did it teach you in Israel that you can behave like that? What makes you a monster?" It's like, okay, I'll take a deep breath and I'll take, Dana, I don't have a quick answer for you, like, what's going on? A lot of thoughts came from my mind, like the educational system in Israel teaches you why we should have a state, doesn't touch a lot about the Palestinian side, but we learn about the Holocaust, we know about the Israel wars. I served in the army, I went to funerals of my friends. My family left middle-class Argentina to live in Israel to start a new life, and it was hard on them, but they decided they want to live in a Jewish state. It was hard, but taking Dana to Israel and showing her around, she got the answer what was passing to my mind. Why we have a state, why we should have a Jewish state, and that was the reason that I invested my efforts for this project to happen.
Good evening. My name is Tarif Nashashibi, and for the people that know me know that it's difficult for me to be brief, but I will be brief. You guys moved me to a point that I didn't think I could after so many years of being in politics, to the fact that my skin is still crawling from some of the statements that you guys have done. And my question for you is, or maybe it's a dare, I hope this is not the last trip. And it's up to you guys to make sure that this is not the last trip. Thank you.
Answer the question really quick. Yes. Yes, we definitely want to have a second trip. We definitely can't do it without your support. This experience was a tremendous experience for all of us. I think I can speak for all of us when I say that. And it really did open our minds and really did challenge us to think outside the box and see both sides of the issue. And I think it's going to help to have another trip, to have 3 more trips, 4 more trips, as many as we can, because the more people we can get here to understand what's going on, we become ambassadors for that. What I've learned is going to go with me for the rest of my life, but also it's going to create dialogue on campus. What we have here, these conversations that we have, these stories that we have, we want to share it with more than just whoever's in this room. We want to tell people on campus what's going on. So we have some ideas on what we want to do to make sure this dialogue exists on campus. I'll just say one of the ideas, maybe one of my colleagues up here can tell you another, but I'm really big on doing a KUCI show, if we can. We met an individual who did bitterlemons.com, and what bitterlemons.com is an academic forum online where you have an academic issue every week, and you have one person from the Israeli side, one person from the Palestinian side, and you talk about it in an academic environment. What I would like to do is take this and do a KUCI show out of this. We would be the moderators, we'd invite people on campus from both sides, and they would have dialogue. We would do a debate, and we'd have a 30-minute or an hour show every week on a different issue. And I think that creates what we experienced when we were on this trip. The fact that we're able to talk about our differences in a civil way, that we're able to get to the root of this issue in a civil way. We didn't have to, yell at each other. We didn't have to call each other names. But we did have some meaningful dialogue, which is what I think this group is all about.
Hello, I'm really glad that you all were able to speak today. And I want to clarify that I'm not Israeli or Palestinian. And so I obviously won't have as much fervor as everyone else. But I am a human being, and you see the problems, and it's not an Israeli issue or a Palestinian issue, it's a human issue. And up until this point, I was hoping that someone might chip in some kind of potential solution, because I hear people saying that Jews and Muslims are walking side by side and praying side by side. But what now? Are all the walls going to come down? Like, what do you guys consider to be a possible solution? I don't expect anyone to be an expert. You guys went for 2 weeks, and you're all my age, so I don't expect anything profound. But after all of that, especially the people that have roots there, what do you guys see as a realistic possible solution? Because people are dying, and yeah.
Wow, that's a big question. I think the question for the century. One thing I noticed is that so you have two factors on confusing the issue. On one side, you have the occupation by the Israelis, which breeds people who have no avenue to express themselves politically, i.e. the Palestinians or Hamas, leads them to do things perhaps to cause attention and have people engage them. And so I think a big step would be decreasing the occupation as much as possible, taking the wall back to the 67 borders, and engaging Hamas, engaging them and asking them and bringing them to the table. As long as we marginalize them and other people who we quote as extremists, we won't go anywhere. It won't lead us to a solution. So I think, and I've been in DC for the past month, and talking to people from the State Department who have the same exact philosophy, is to engage Hamas and engage these other groups. Because this conflict is so central to the conflict within the region, or how people say, between the West and the Muslim world. Muslim countries are willing to come to peace with Israel, to recognize Israel, if they just bring peace to that region. I think a big step would be to recognize Hamas and go and to talk to Hamas. But it's a very complicated issue. I have no right to speak on behalf of that issue, that conflict, but this is just my opinion.
I want to add to your question. I think one of the big things that we got from this group and from the trip was that we heard so many different perspectives on the issue and on solutions. And I think we pretty much asked every speaker, what do you suggest is the right solution for this conflict? And one of the things that we saw is that everybody has a different solution. And the more we heard, the more confused we got and the more complex the issue got. There are so many different aspects to this conflict that many of us didn't even know existed, didn't expect to hear. And I think even if, at least for me, even if I thought I knew the right solution after hearing everybody in the trip, I don't think there is a simple solution. This issue is way bigger than anyone can ever imagine, and there's so many little parts. And even like Samir said, how can you divide the street that they're walking on? Both are walking. Are you just going to put a line in the middle of the street and say, if you cross over the line, you're in my territory? You can't just divide cities or whatnot. And that was one big thing, is that there's so many perspectives. The issue is so complex. And you have to reach a solution. The question is, I think, what it is, which we all have. And I don't know if we have the right answers or not. But, that was one main thing for me. So.
Let's have one more student response and then move on to the next question.
I'm not going to pretend to have an answer to that, but I just thought it would be important to say that in talking to every speaker from different positions, as Moran said, everyone had their own solution. And I thought it was important to note what a professor, Muli Peleg, said to us that really resonated with me is that the problem is not between Muslims and Jews or Palestinians and Israelis. It's a conflict between moderates and extremists, and the moderates far away in number the extremists, but the extremists on both sides, you know, a squeaky wheel gets, you know, they get the most attention from the media, and they cause problems that affect the entire population. So I think empowering the majority of the people, they don't necessarily agree, they don't necessarily want to change their opinions, but they're willing to do a lot to have peace because they want the same thing. They want to be able to feed their children and have jobs and have homes. And they're willing to do a lot to gain that, and I think that's important to remember.
My name is Vladimir Gorin, and I want to ask about what can be a solution, but what I've heard from several people here, that the key to the solution should be people talking to each other. As much or as many people as possible from all walks of life there, including here, in all senses. So my question is, what practical ways, what practical arrangements can grow from your trip for facilitating dialogue between as many people there as possible, and maybe starting from here and growing from here there. Practically, what can you think of to bring it there?
What can we do over here? You can choose like where you want to donate your money. That's very basic. Like, no, you have events over here going on. You can decide to put your money in one cause, and you can give your money to a hospital or a university. So when you write a check for something that is happening over there, make sure that it goes for the right cause. It's very easy to be here and to say, fight forever, it's our land. But be practical. People are dying over there, not in Orange County. So give money to the right cause. That's the goal of diasporas over here.
Another fundraiser pitch? No, that was not my question. My question was about people talking there, not giving money, but how can, from your trip, grow? What can you do?
You can move to Israel and vote over there. That's one option.
Okay. Sorry.
Okay,
I have a comment.
Can I jump in just for 1 minute? Actually, towards the end of the trip, we learned of some updates on two of the people that we had met with. We met with one person, his name was Avihu. He's Jewish, and he explained to us how his father was killed. He was shot multiple times in the head as he was driving home. And also another person, he's a Palestinian, his name is Usama. He wasn't able, you know, when you're a Palestinian, you can only get a permit to go into Israel 3 days for every year. You're only allotted those 3 days, and you need a very special permit to get in. So we met with both of them separately in Israel and in Palestine. And afterwards, they learned about each other. And Avihu said, you know what, I want to talk. I want to talk to Usama. I want to stand on my balcony. And they could sort of see each other from their balconies, from the opposite sides. I want to talk to them. Give me his cell phone number. And they did. And from there, because of Avihu's connections, his brother is in the IDF. He was able to pull strings, get Usama and his family permits to go into Israel because his son had like a dream to see the ocean, just like a simple wish to see the ocean. And they went to Israel, and they all spent time together. So I think that already shows what the potential and possibilities are from daring to just say, you know, questioning why can't we do anything? Why can't we take the initiative upon ourselves?
Thank you, Vaughn. Yeah, but just to further clarify a couple things. You know, we, as the Olive Tree panel, our name is Olive Tree. Everyone knows olive is the international symbol of peace. So we may have been giving you this lovey-dovey idea, of how things, occur over there. But let me, tell you something. When we were on that rooftop and having that dinner that we all felt so warm and fuzzy at, which we did, I guarantee it, the host of that dinner pointed directly across, and he said, "Do you see that wall right there?" And we said, "Yeah." He said, "That's the Christian quarter. It's right 12 feet away from us." Guess what? You won't find a single entrance into that quarter. You won't find it. You don't know where it is. Armenian Orthodox quarter, sorry. One day I drifted off. I was looking for the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, and then I accidentally dwindled into the Jewish quarter of the city, which I found out was the Jewish quarter because no one knew where the church was. Who'd figure, right? So, as you can see, these people live next to each other. It doesn't mean that just because they live next to each other, there's perfect integration going on. So just to lead to that, not to lead to that misconception, but one of the things is that we also met with a bunch of students, all right, at the Hebrew University in Jerusalem, right when we got there. And I had a complex theory that I basically came up with on the spot. I'm sure it's not unique to me, but it had to do with kind of a game theory principle. And what I noticed is that the four prominent students that started clashing and debating towards each other, because the professor brought in all kinds of opinions, we had an extreme person on the Israeli side, extreme person on the Palestinian side, and a moderate Palestinian and a moderate Israeli. And what you found is that the moderate Palestinian and the moderate Israeli really thought similar to each other, but their rationale for being moderate was based on the fear that the extremist on the other side would be successful. So they had to compromise by being moderate rather than to be extreme. So I think one of the things is, if you guys picked up with that extremely confusing statement, is that people need to stop being moderate because they're scared and be moderate because they want to. Moderation cannot be a compromise. It has to be what you want because you genuinely want peace. You genuinely want to live with these people, not you realize that you're going to have to live with them in 50 years, so you better let them have their own state now. That's not the way the mentality has to be.
I was wondering if from the people that you talked to in Israel, did any of them feel like a 3-hour checkpoint to go through Palestine or from Palestine to another place was absolutely necessary? I realize that there are extremists out there. It must be difficult to screen every single person, but do you believe and do they believe that if those barriers were broken or minimized, would there be less extremism and maybe even more a better forward towards peace, or I don't know, a solution to this? Thank you.
Thank you for your question. I think one thing that we learned while we were in Israel and the region was that no one really, both on the Israeli side and the Palestinian side, no one liked the wall. No one liked the checkpoints. No one liked any of that, right? People, we heard a lot of Palestinians very upset by it, and we also heard a lot of Israelis upset by it. But I think for me, what I sort of think about is if those checkpoints weren't there and the wall wasn't there, there would be a lot more infiltration into Israel, and there would be a lot more terrorism. And that would create hatred on the Israeli side, and it will spew back to the other side. So I think the wall, for example, is basically, it's not the solution to the problem. The wall is basically something to put there to keep people sane for now until we can find a solution. I remember we spoke to an Israeli guy that was talking about how much he disliked the wall. Although he understood that it was necessary, he disliked it because he used to go into Ramallah and buy hummus and hang out with his friends there, and he couldn't do that anymore, But the fact that, things like this, that the wall itself has reduced terrorism in Israel by over 90%, is something that, makes it necessary for Israelis. So.
We talked to a lot of coexistence centers working from Israel, and they were working on getting students to go from Palestinian students and Israeli students to try to meet each other so they can break the barriers. And they really felt that the wall wasn't necessary, that it divided the people. Like literally 2 people, an Israeli student and a Palestinian student, can be living within 10 miles of each other and yet not know what the other person looks like. So that was one of the people that wanted no wall, and provided that like stance. Another point was we actually met with a Palestinian professor. He teaches in America I forgot, this East Coast University, but he was telling us how like the wall didn't really minimize suicide bombing attacks. It wasn't a security wall. He was telling us about the economic like devastation that it was causing, but it was more for the Israeli people as a safety net. Like they felt that the wall was necessary for there to be peace, like, and for there to not be suicide bombing. They were holding it almost like as a scapegoat notion, if that makes sense.
Okay, to respond to your question, what struck me so much by going to Israel and Palestine was that the society, the body of land is so small, but you have so many different views. I'd never seen so many diverse views in such a small body of land. I don't think that could exist somewhere else. And so of course there are people in Israel who believe that the wall is unjust, and any opinion you have, there's a segment of the population in Israel and Palestine that will agree with it. But what we see today, what we experienced was that the checkpoints and the separation barrier and the victims of terrorism and state and individual terrorism, these are all symptomatic of a social structural problem where the societies cannot come together and agree. And that is part of the tragedy of having so many diverse opinions. And so, it's what I saw was that you cannot see the conflict as so simple that one side is clearly wrong, because there are segments of the population who will entirely agree with you. To me, the wall is fine, but I was completely opposed to where it was built, which was what Palestinians consider their own land, their own territory. In fact, 13% of the wall encompasses more of the West Bank, including the settlements. And so I think that there are serious grievances on either side, that the wall will reduce the amount of victims, but it will also increase the amount of hatred. So we need to find a political settlement that's acceptable to both peoples. And we can all go on and on about our views about that. We each have many. So.
Thank you for taking my question. I'm sitting in my chair listening to each of you share what your experience was, and I've got to say I was deeply moved by some of the things that I heard. I'm not Israeli, I'm not Palestinian, I don't have any ties to that. I guess you could say I'm a typical Southern California student going to college. And what I'm really hearing, or what I'm want to know is, if you had like one line of dialogue, one sentence to say, and I would love to hear from as many people as possible, just one sentence you could say to someone like me, or people who are sitting in this audience, who are just people, normal people, coming from well, you each have a connection to that region. You had something that drew you to be at the front line. I'm someone who's coming from wherever I'm coming from, which is just a Southern California student. And I just want to hear what would be the one line that you would say to make a difference for someone like me and the people like me in this region. Why should I care about that? Why does it matter? Or just whatever you would like to say. That's what I'm really interested in.
I think I have a one-liner. Don't be afraid of being wrong. Admitting to it. Don't. If you're an Israeli, don't be afraid to say that the occupation is wrong. If you're a Palestinian, don't be afraid of saying killing innocent people is wrong. Not that they do that consistently, but I'm saying don't be afraid of admitting that you're wrong. And I think once we do that, people's minds will open up, and they'll say, okay, maybe I was wrong. We need to get pragmatic about the solution. And I think the fact that we're not coming back with this whole package and a document laid out for a peace plan. But the Muslims and Jews of America must come together, and they must work together within this democratic fabric, within our democratic institution, and pressure and put pressure on our politicians, and reduce some pressure that's coming from certain lobbyist groups, and so we can work pragmatically, because those people are coming and they're influencing our political structure, which influences political structures abroad. And we need to work together as Muslims and Jews within the American institution, because we have this opportunity and we have hope. But until we admit that we're wrong, we don't come together here and over there, we're not going to come to a resolution, I don't think.
I want to thank you all for being here. It's been so moving and inspiring. Kind of along the lines of what was just being said, and in the spirit of tonight's title, which is Beyond Stereotypes, I want to put you on the spot, if you don't mind, and I want to ask you a very personal question. And I'd like to ask the audience to be respectful of the fact that these students are here, being willing to be vulnerable before us and really just pour their guts out about how they felt before and after. So what I'd like to ask you, and I'd love to hear from as many of you as possible, is what preconceived notions did you go on this trip with that was absolutely transformed, that was shattered? And I'm not going to call it, that you realize you were wrong, because you, through whatever circumstances that you grew up in, had certain ideas about how things are. And I'd really love to hear about what did you see that was absolutely not the way you thought it was, so that we can benefit from that through you. As many of you as you can answer. Thank you.
I think it's a great question. For me, I think one kind of notion that was kind of blown away is this isn't a unified Israel, this isn't a unified Palestine. There are so many different ideas, and there's so many different nuances, I guess you can say, in both camps. You can't say this is the Israeli narrative, this is the Palestinian narrative. And I think that was one of the notions that was completely blown away from me, because the scope of this, you go into it. The last 4 years at UCI, I've taken a lot of classes on the Middle East, and Israel Palestine has been in a lot of those. And I like to think of myself as a little bit more educated than the average Joe on Middle Eastern issues. So going there, I kind of had this idea of what to expect. But I went there, and I was completely blown away by the number of different opinions there. We talked to dozens of speakers, and everyone had something different. You can get a group of people, sit around a table, all have two-state solution. Everyone's two-state solution is completely different than the person sitting across the table from each other. So that, for me, was just this idea like, wow, I didn't even know. The scope, it was so huge. It was so hard for me to wrap my mind around it. And, someone asked the question, well, what's the solution? If I knew the solution, I wouldn't be sitting here right now. It's a very hard question, but it's very difficult when you have all these different ideas floating around, and people think that, their solution or their opinion is the right one. And, that was kind of something that changed for me when I went there.
For me, going in, this entire trip gave me a much deeper understanding of every aspect of the conflict. And there's two things that I want to talk about. The first is, before this trip, I really didn't have a deep understanding of the Jewish story, of the Holocaust, of the need for a Jewish state. And after this trip, coming from Arab background and actually going to school in Lebanon, not being taught about the Holocaust. I happened to be there during junior high and high school, so I missed it in the schools here. So going to Yad Vashem, a memorial, Holocaust memorial museum in Israel, gave me a completely different understanding. So that was one thing. But the second thing is I went on this trip also opposed to the wall. But after the trip, I actually became even more opposed to the wall for a completely different reason. I had a much more better understanding of exactly what was wrong with the wall. And one specific example is Kilkilia. It's a village that we actually got to see, and we were shown by an IDF soldier. And Kilkilia actually is a village where the wall goes entirely around it, with a gate that opens up. And people are allowed in and out of Kilkilia a certain number of times a day. And so I think to myself, if I were to put myself in their shoes, to have to live in a village like that where the wall goes entirely around it, and I'm told when I can and cannot leave, how would I feel? And so I see the need for a Jewish state now more than ever. But also at the same time, I come to think that a lot of the things currently that are being done are at the expense of the Palestinian people in securing this Jewish state. And so that was one thing where I felt two things had changed, that I understand the need for a Jewish state, and I understand the need for a secure Jewish state more than ever. But then also, is everything that's being done to secure this state, is all of it justified? Or are there some things that are actually being done at the expense of the Palestinian people, where they're stuck in this village, and also to protect Israeli citizens, and Israel has the right to do that. But these are citizens that are also living in a settlement, that are in Palestinian land. So a lot of times, that's something that I looked at it and I was like, is it fair? And can you say Palestinians have no right to get upset when they're locked in a town like that, a village like that? So those are two things that really changed on this trip.
All right, look, guys, I'm Muslim. It's not that hard for me to find some preconceived notions I had. All right, I'm not going to tell you I didn't think Israelis take showers. I'm not going to tell you that. All right, because come on, guys, there's not a lot of water in the region. I mean, come on. No. But one of the things, all right, one of the things that I definitely had a lot of preconceived notions about is the issue pertaining to the Masjid al-Aqsa, which is also considered to be the Temple Mount by those of the Jewish faith. And obviously, this is an issue which has been mobilized by Islamic people worldwide as a center point in order to garner support for the Palestinian conflict. That site is being desecrated, that it's every day persistently under threat of being demolished because of diggings that are happening. Now, I'm going to tell you straightforward, that's not what I saw. And I'm not saying that it's true or it's not true, but what I did see is that it was the holy month of Ramadan when I went. And at the very gateway to the mosque, there were Israeli soldiers with M16s in front of it, and yeah, they had a very intimidating presence, but they were the ones that actually would stop me every day to make sure that I was Muslim coming in. So to some extent, I felt that, wait a minute, why are these guys actually somewhat protecting this holy area? But so to that degree, yeah, I didn't see that it was like a 20-foot by 60-foot cube that was standing on stilts with a Jewish guy waiting to knock the stilt off for it to fall over. That's not what I observed. All right. Now, were there diggings that were happening, excavations? Yeah, I was told a variety of explanations by different people as to why they were happening. Some people said they were just to clear the area for paleontological and historical remains before they could rebuild a bridge. Some people said, no, you don't understand. This digging is going straight under and right under the foundation, and the whole thing is going to collapse. The thing doesn't look like something that's going to collapse. It's a very big mountain. It's not about to collapse. I can tell you that straightforward. But what can I tell you though? I learned that it's an off and on situation. I went there at a good time. When I went there, I prayed in the mosque. There were people under 40 years old in there. Some people have told me that sometimes Israelis, they place restrictions on the area. They don't allow Palestinians to enter unless they're over 40 years old. I prayed in the mosque. Everyone was let in. Even my Indian and Pakistani counterparts, who I had to talk to the guards in Arabic and explain that they were actually Muslims from that part of the world to them. So, it was interesting to say the least. But one of the things is when we went in, we were actually praying in the mosque. We were actually shown or directed kind of to a cabinet that was in the very back. And in that cabinet, there were empty canisters, empty tear gas canisters. Every single time in the mosque's history that a tear gas canister has been shot into the vicinity by the Israeli military, they save the shell and they keep them. And that thing is lined with them. So it's not as if conflict has not existed. It's not that people are happy to be living next to each other all the time. It's not exactly, like people are thrilled that these sites are being, there's digging going around, and there's been digging on both sides, by the way. There's been digging from the Jordanian Waqf, and there's been digging from the Israeli Archaeological Committee. And both sides are offended by the digging. So that definitely, preconceived notions that it's not straightforward. There is definitely the neutral presence in the region, I would have to say, is going to be the Israeli military directly in that region. And actually, when someone was asking me, what do you suggest for like a final suggestion for some kind of a two-state solution? And I was like, well, you know what? I was only there for a week, and I know there's like on and off times. Like sometimes it's horrible. I've heard, the Israeli military can really crack down. You know what I mean? A lot of people don't like that, But I was kind of observing from things, and I was saying, currently they kind of do, at least for the week I was there, a good job of keeping the whole thing together, even though everyone's not exactly happy. Sometimes, bottom line is, it's not exactly like everyone paints it. That's all I'm trying to say.
Mine is dealing with freedom of speech. I had visited other Arab, Israel's not Arab, it's a Jewish state, but I visited some Arab states in the Middle East, and my parents would tell me, whatever you say, just don't mention anything about the government. Don't talk anything bad about the government, because this is not America. We can't control what happens. But I was so surprised and so happy to see that in Israel, both Arab Israelis and Jewish Israelis, there's some Arab Israelis who are actually Jewish also, but everyone in Israel just spoke whatever they wanted, and it was completely fine and safe. And I was just absolutely that just meant so much to me to see that. I just wanted to add that.
One preconceived notion I had, I guess it was a stereotype, was, we hear a lot in the news about settlements and about the illegal settlements in the Palestinian territories. We visited a few settlements. One of the settlements we visited was called Ariel, and we sat down with the mayor. And I thought before I went there, I was like, wow, these must be some crazy right-wing Jews that just want to kill Arabs. And I had this really a huge stereotype in my head. And we sat down with him, and he started telling us about the city and how they settled the land. He settled the land 30-something years ago, and there was nothing there. And how basically his city, and as the mayor of that city, he's helped provide electricity and water and education to Palestinian villages around the settlement. And so it really struck me, because in my head, I always thought these settlements were horrible, and they were contributing so much to the perpetuation of the conflict. And I sat down there and I saw a settlement that, for a second I thought maybe it's a good thing that this settlement is here. Maybe it really is helping to bring people together and being mutually beneficial to everyone. So I guess what I'm trying to say is we shouldn't make judgments about what we hear in the news, because we just hear one little thing, one little sentence, and we judge a whole community, a whole country, and most of the time it's probably going to be way off.